Hello, everyone. Welcome to another virtual event with Mysterious Galaxy. I am Nick, the Director of Events for the store. Today, we have two wonderful authors here to talk about some wonderful books. Of course, we are celebrating Tobias Madden's latest novel, Take a Bow, Noah Mitchell. Hi, Tobias.
Hi, thank you for having me.
In conversation, we have Robbie Couch. Hi, Robbie.
Hey, hello.
For those of you unfamiliar, Tobias Madden, before he started writing, worked for 10 years as a dancer, touring Australia and New Zealand with musicals such as Mary Poppins, Cats, Singin' in the Rain. His debut novel, Anything But Fine, was shortlisted for Book of the Year for Older Children in 2022 Australian Book Industry Awards and won the Book Award for Older Readers in Australian Association of Family Therapy Awards. That's a long title, but that's great. He now lives in New York with his husband, Daniel, and their cavoodle, Ollie.
Who will probably make an appearance at some time in this video because he's pretty clingy at the moment.
A cavoodle? Is that what I heard?
I think in America you call them cavapoos.
Oh.
Okay.
It's like a fluffy little dog, basically.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I have seen this on your Instagram. Yes.
Yeah.
I think. Yes. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay.
Okay.
Robbie Couch is a Michigan native who lives in Los Angeles. He is the author of Blaine for the Win and Sky Blues, a 2022 Barnes & Noble Young Adult Book of the Year finalist and Junior Library Guild selection. His third novel, If I See You Again Tomorrow, is due out April 18th here in the U.S., so pre-order while you can. But of course, we are here to talk about Tobias's latest, Take a Bow, Noah Mitchell. For those of you who have yet to order, what are you doing? What are you waiting for? There's a link below that'll take you to our website. In the comment section, you can also get a signed and or personalized book plate. Just make sure if you want signed or personalized, you just let us know in there. And we'll have supplies last, some really cool art cards. I don't have like an example to show you. We haven't gotten them yet. But if you go on our website, you'll see a cool picture of them. Oh,
I have one of those. I don't have my book, but I have.
Yay!
That is cool. I like that.
They're really nice.
Yeah.
And then lastly, before I disappear for a little bit, if you have any questions you would like to ask, under the screen here, you'll see an Ask a Question button. If you click that, you can submit your question and it'll be answered later on in the program. All right, for now, I'm going to disappear. I'll leave it to Tobias and Robbie to take it away. I'll see you, everyone, shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tobias, yay. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, it's been a pretty overwhelming, I guess, almost couple of months now. Dan and I moved to New York on the 22nd of November. So it's been pretty nuts just trying to set up our lives like completely from scratch. We brought nothing except like 2 suitcases of clothes and our dog. And so we arrived and just had to kind of, start from scratch, which has been really overwhelming. But everything has kind of been falling into place nicely, which is great. Lots of positive things. And, to be here in America to launch this book is really cool because not a lot of Australian authors kind of ever get to do that. We're not close to America. It's super far away. So kind of just popping over for the weekend to launch a book. I feel very grateful to be here to do all of this and some in-person stuff, which is really fun.
Amazing. Yeah, that's the very long flight is the main reason why I've never gone to Australia. That's terrible. No, I've never been. It's definitely a bucket list thing. My good friend Melissa moved there a couple of years ago. I've been promising a trip, so it'll happen. That's a long flight.
It's a big commitment, but I promise it's 100% worth it.
Oh, I'm sure I would love it. Yeah. But enough about me and my fear of long flights. Thank you so much for asking me to do this event because I love the book so much. I ate it up. It was such a fun read, and I feel like you really were able to balance that like lighthearted, fun. It was so funny. I feel like I had like a LOL moment on every page, which is certainly not the case with a lot of books that are trying to be funny. But you did such a good job, and you balanced that with some really heartfelt moments and messaging that were a bit more serious in nature, but still felt accessible. I don't know. It was great. It was such a good read. As I told you, I'm the worst conversation partner off the bat because I don't have a physical copy of the book. To people watching at home, Tobias did a great job sending me an advanced copy. Didn't arrive. Another copy that was sent didn't arrive. I think I have a ghost in my building that steals packages. I think
literary ghost who is obsessed with queer YA. I think is what's happening.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. And then I mailed it to the wrong address in an apartment. I ordered it by myself. Yeah, it's been a mess. So, but I did read the book, a digital copy, of course, and it was so great. I will also point out I have I'm not sick, but I still have a lingering cough from a few weeks ago. So if I hack up a lung, I'm sorry to gross anyone out who has to witness that. I will try to keep it together. So can you just start us off by explaining what the book is about in a brief little succinct way, which I hate that question as an author, so I apologize to start things off with that. But I think it's important in case people aren't aware.
Yeah, of course. And do you know what? Like with my first book, Anything But Fine, I hated this question because every time I wanted to explain it, I felt like I had to do like a full backstory for all the characters and like, you know, explain the whole thing. But this one, I'm actually okay at this one, which is proved pretty useful for me. So Take A Bow, Noah Mitchell is the story of a 17-year-old gamer who decides to go undercover in a local production of Chicago the Musical, where his mother is playing the lead role, of course, in order to win the heart of his secret online crush. So that's the story in a nutshell. You know, harebrained schemes and web of lies, all of that, lots of fun ensues. But yeah, it's like you said, it's a pretty lighthearted book, but it delves into a couple of little things along the way, which was really, really fun and satisfying.
Yeah, no, that was a better like 15-second elevator pitch than I've ever done for any of my books. So great job.
No, like I can't do it for my other one. I literally still can't do it for Anything But Fine. I've been doing it for like 2 years now.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I know it's a skill. I think you have to hone it with every book. You kind of get a little bit better and more comfortable, just like getting a few sentences down. But it's tough. Yeah. So I was going to ask. So as you mentioned, the book Noah is such a huge gamer in the story, and that's right in chapter 1, something you learn about him right away. And you're kind of just like in that world of gaming right away. Were you a gamer as a kid / are you a gamer now? I suspect so, but I didn't want to assume. Okay.
Yeah. As a teenager, it was probably like my only hobby, realistically, especially before I got into the theatre world, because I started, you know, singing and dancing quite late, as far as most of my friends go, who started when they were like 3 years old. So my older brother was really into games, and he got me into it, and we would spend like our entire weekends just, you know, holed up in the study, just playing these games together. And actually, it was usually me just watching him play the games because he was the older brother. So he would like get to do everything first, and I'd have to sit there and wait for my turn. And then he would desert me and I'd be left doing it by myself. But yeah, so I played a lot of games. I've played a bit as an adult, kind of just like if my favorite games as a teen had a new iteration or like a sequel, I would always play them. But I mean, finding time to do anything when you're an author is kind of hard on top of like, you know, working full time and stuff. So I don't have a lot of gaming time anymore. And I do miss it. I really do. It's such a fun kind of escape from reality, I guess, in the same way that reading is. You know, so many of those games, particularly like those kind of fantasy role-playing games and stuff like that, they have these really rich, beautiful stories that you kind of have to play through. So I do kind of miss that element of it, I think. But yeah, big gamer.
No, that's awesome. And I feel like since I've gotten older, I feel like I have a few friends that are still the big gamers and really involved in like different gaming communities. And I've like grown increasingly jealous of them because I feel like it's such a great way to meet friends too, both like friends that live anywhere in the world, but also in your own area. And I'm always jealous. And to your point about as an author not having time to do anything, I feel like I need to find some hobbies like that to like build some local connections and stuff, but it's hard. So
it's hard.
Yeah. I loved the part of the book. Well, the premise of the book with Noah really falling for this boy who it's sort of this almost contradiction where like he knows him so well and has played with him for so long that he really does know who this person is, and he knows that he has these very strong feelings for him, and at the same time knows so little about him. So I love that concept of having this like almost stranger that you know inside and out. And was that something that was kind of the original foundation or premise that you wanted to go off of? Was that something that kind of worked into the story later? Like, kind of where did the story come from, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, originally, like when I started planning my second book, it was kind of like towards the end of 2020, when the whole world was kind of a bit of a shambles. And so I was just like, you know what, I just want to write about something that I really love. And so then my two options were theater and gaming. And then in the end, I was like, oh, I just want to do them both. And then had to find a way to sort of combine these two very, very separate elements, because obviously the gaming world is completely online. The theater world is completely in person, and very kind of separate types of people and you know, skills and that sort of stuff. But then, so then that's kind of how I came to this, this idea that no one needs to join this musical to meet this online crush who is not allowed to meet in real life and is not allowed to know anything about his crush that would identify them in the real world. So like you said, it's that thing where he feels like they have this, you know, super genuine, really beautiful connection. But if he walked past him in the street, he would have no idea who it is. And so that kind of really intrigues me, because I love, you know, how I guess these days we all have these online friends, whether it's in a game or on Instagram or on, you know, any number of the platforms that we have these days. And sometimes like you really can form a genuine connection with someone. And then other times they might not actually be the person that they say they are at all, which I think is really fascinating, and also, you know, kind of important for teens to wrap their heads around, because, you know, the internet is a pretty big, scary place and bad things do happen, but you also can make these really beautiful connections. So I really wanted to look at kind of how those two things, you know, kind of connect.
Yeah. I feel like anyone who's done like online dating for a half second knows that sometimes it does. Sometimes people aren't what they say they are.
No, and I feel like everyone in the world at this point, you know, who's a consenting adult has tried online dating in some form. And it's a pretty scary thing sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too with like, I've noticed with some of my friends, even just like the way that we'll text each other, like we'll have different like texting or communication styles. And if I didn't know them in the real world, I'd be like, this guy is so like, this is not my speed, or like, you know, you don't connect in that way. But because they're your friend and you know them, you of course are friends with them. And it can of course be the opposite, where like, whether it's, you know, just a Twitter person that you're like message sometimes, or someone you know on social media that you have that good rapport with, but it may or may not translate into the real world. It's almost like you can sometimes have to like categorize friendships. It's like, okay, you're my Twitter friend, but maybe we don't get along in the real world as much, but that's okay.
Yeah. And I mean, for Noah, that's kind of how his plan starts out, because he, you know, he decides to join this musical to see, you know, initially if the connection that he feels is real or not. Because if it's not, then he can just not pursue that at all. But then, you know, he gets there and realizes, in fact, that it is incredibly real, and then
very real.
Is suddenly in much deeper than he kind of intended.
What did he get himself into?
Yeah.
One thing I really loved about, just to go back to the gaming aspect really quick, I'm not a gamer, and I played like Banjo-Kazooie, I played some Mario Kart as a kid, but I was never like a huge gamer, and I haven't read a ton of books where the main character was a gamer. And so it was really interesting to, right out of the gate, you kind of bring the reader into the game he's playing in such like a vivid, descriptive way that I really enjoyed. And I wasn't, maybe I'm just ignorant, but I wasn't expecting that. And I think sometimes I read like through the eye of an author if I were to write this book. And I think if I were to write about video games, it would be something pretty straightforward. Like, you know, he started playing the game, and then it would immediately go back to like the dialogue between the people. or whatever. And I just thought it was such a great choice to not only have that descriptive language that brings the reader in, but then it also really ties that to who Noah is and why it's so important to him, and really informs you of who he is as a gamer. Did you do like a lot of, did you spend time world building with the game a lot, or was it something that was more kind of off the cuff, like, I'm gonna make this tree green, or what? I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did a little bit of planning. Like, I'm a pretty big planner in general, and so I knew that I wanted kind of the events of the game to loosely mirror some of the events that were happening in the real world. And some people don't notice that, which is fine, and other people do, and it's kind of like this fun thing where they're like, oh, that's kind of, you know, reflecting what's happening in, you know, Noah's life in the real world, which is just a fun kind of little extra thing going on. But I think because I played so many of this specific kind of game, I was able to kind of just do a lot of that on the go. But I did know where the game was going so that it matched up with the kind of real world timeline. But it was a really fun thing to write because, you know, I write contemporary books, and so I don't get to talk about elves and goblins and stuff like that, which I love so much. Like, I love fantasy. But, you know, my first manuscript was a fantasy manuscript, which will absolutely never be published in any form.
Oh, man.
But, I feel like so many of us, when we started writing, had a fantasy manuscript, and then they just get lost in the drawer.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, I was little. I think I was maybe like 12 or something. So I don't even know if you can call it a manuscript, but it was like, you know, it was some words on a page.
Yeah.
But wait, so why, can I ask why are you for sure going to stay away from fantasy forever? Or is it just something that, are you going to dabble in it down the road, or who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I might come back to it eventually. I'd need to have a really solid idea. I think, you know, I think I always saw myself as becoming a fantasy writer. And then when that sort of like emphatically did not work out with that first manuscript, I was like, maybe I need to pivot here. And then as soon as I started writing contemporary, it just felt so much more natural. I feel like I was trying to probably use a combination of my favorite authors' kind of voices in that fantasy space. And then doing contemporary really allowed me to just write how I wanted to write. So I think if I did go back to fantasy after having a few books under my belt, I might do it in a way that was more kind of authentically me, which would be fun. But I think at the moment I have way too many ideas that are not fantasy. Do you have that? Do you have like a list of ideas that you're just like, when am I ever going to have time to write these?
Yeah, I know. I have a very rough Google Doc that's just like, some things are much more fleshed out, and then some things are just like, yeah, one word things that I'm like, who knows if that'll ever be a thing, a story. But yeah, I try to stay on top of it. But I also feel like with fantasy, it's like, unless you are very confident it's going to sell, I feel like those books, it can be a lot of time and a lot of effort to pour into it. I mean, I'm writing a more speculative book right now, and it's not even like full sci-fi, but even just the amount of outlining and kind of building out that world is, I'm like, oh my gosh, people do this. This is nuts.
It's so nice to just be able to talk about the real world and not have to make anything
right, and not create one. Yeah. Totally. Another thing that I really loved about Take a Bow, Noah Mitchell, was you have these, there was like a lot of layers to it and a lot of things happening without it being overwhelming as a reader or feeling like there's too much and it's too chaotic, which I really appreciated. I loved like the gaming aspect and tying that to Noah's identity. There was also sort of the one thing his lying was like, I mean, I won't give too much away, but you see how his lying has informed the story, and you're kind of like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? But then the more you learn about the character, you understand the reasoning behind it, which I think was very smart. And then of course to tie that into the lying, the mystery of like how he lost his friend and kind of that story. Did you have to, I always think about like, did one of those things kind of stand out to you as the most important foundation to build the others, or was it something that kind of felt was it sort of like a messy puzzle that kind of figured itself out?
I'm just like trying to cast my mind back to 2020 and my decision.
It's hard.
Like there is a lot going on, and I think like in the next book that I'm working on, there's also a lot going on, but it feels like there's a lot going on. Whereas in this one, I feel like it's reasonably smooth, which is, yeah, I'm doing a pretty fun structural edit for that next one at the moment. But this one, I think the core of the story in all of my planning was Noah's romance and that kind of whole thing. And then I think the others kind of stemmed from that quite naturally. And sort of when I realized there was, you know, a gap to fill here, or this character needed their own kind of thing going on. Because I mean, one thing that I really love when I read and also when I write is that the secondary characters are very three-dimensional and have their own stories. I always hate reading when there's like a best friend character or a parent or sibling or something who just is purely there as a function for the main character. But then having said that, when you suddenly give everyone else a backstory and their own kind of goal within the book, then suddenly there's a lot going on. But I think, you know, I love when they're all kind of interconnected, and having all of those characters, you know, a lot of the scenes take place in this rehearsal room, you know, where they're doing Chicago. And so having all those characters there at the same time, trying to achieve kind of different things, led to some really fun writing moments for me, you know, to kind of explore all that. Hey, Ollie, it's okay.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you promised an appearance, or you didn't promise, but you said there may be an appearance from, it's Ollie, like Ollie?
Yeah.
Ollie, oh my gosh.
Okay. Quickly. Okay.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, you're not happening. Okay.
Camera shy.
No worries. I get it, Ollie. Something else that really stood out to me with this book, and I already kind of thought this about you, but then I was looking through, do you ever read the comments on Amazon, on Goodreads? Are you a comment reader or no?
No, I actually don't. I did for my first book for a little while, and then I got a couple of comments that were just like, you know how like 3-star reviews are just like the most ruthless comments you've ever seen, like so much worse than a 1-star. Where you're just
what
like,
is that?
But those 3-star ones where they're just like so kind of like painfully indifferent to like your book, and I'm just like, and so I stopped pretty quickly because I was like, I actually don't have the self-esteem for this.
Yeah, that is such a good point that I actually haven't thought of with the 3 stars. That is very, very true. Because I almost feel like if someone gives me a 1-star, there's almost like an implication that it's like, well, the book wasn't for them, or they didn't read it, or they're a troll or something. But it's like, if it's a 3-star, it's like they tried to like it and they didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I only bring that up to say I was reading the comments and they were overwhelmingly lovely and amazing. Just FYI. But I don't read the comments on my own stuff either. And the thing that stood out to me was I noticed a few of them pointing to you being such a good, you write teens so well. And I was like, oh my gosh, he really does. And I know that might sound pretty obvious with YA books, but I feel like it's hard. And I've read plenty of YA books where I feel like you can tell it's, you know, a 45-year-old trying to be a 16-year-old. And I feel like a lot of times it can come across as pretty like infantilizing the way that YA books are written, or on the other end of the spectrum, they sound like they're very small children. And I feel like you did such a good job with this book of having the characters, you weren't afraid to show the messy side of being a teenager and the mistakes that you make. And, you know, they're on their own learning journey where they're of course not thinking the same way that an older adult would, but you do in a way that still shows them as a full person and character, and doesn't really infantilize their experience or who they are, which I really appreciated. And I'm wondering if you approach that in like a specific intentional way. Is there like any tool, and I guess I'm asking advice as a fellow YA author, I need to take some notes here. Is there any like intentional process behind that, or is it something that kind of just comes inherent with creating the characters and the story? Yeah,
I mean, I've been asked this question a few times in like at festivals and stuff in Australia, and I never quite know the answer, because I feel like sometimes as writers we kind of just do stuff and just like hope for the best, and we're not necessarily like super consciously aware of everything we're doing. But I feel like for me, the writing for teens thing is more about writing each character authentically rather than trying to find a teenage voice. Because I feel like if you just know who the character is and what they want, and, you know, their kind of interests, their background, that sort of stuff, then they come across just sounding very authentically themselves. And then they, because they are 17, they automatically sound 17, which might be a bit of a cop-out of an answer. But like, I feel quite passionate about like different characters' vocabulary and stuff like that. When I wrote Anything But Fine, the main character is a ballet dancer, and he hates school. He's not book smart. He spent his entire life in a dance studio, his entire life around girls. And so I remember reading sort of my first draft of a few chapters and just reading the words that I had chosen to use as an author, and realizing very quickly that that is not actually how that person would talk, and then having to really rein in my own vocabulary. And I feel like it's so tempting all the time as a writer to just be like, here's all of the big words that I know, and I'm a really fancy author. But if it's not right for the characters, it just feels really forced and really fake. And so that was a big thing for me in that book. But then this book, Noah, is so different. And, you know, he spends his whole life online. All of the references that he makes to things in the world are to do with, you know, fantasy books and games and that sort of stuff. Whereas everyone around him just keeps referencing musicals all the time, and he has no fucking clue what they're talking about. And yeah, so I think for me, it's just about each character rather than trying to write that kind of teen voice. Because I mean, I still feel like that. Like I feel like I'm about 17 or 18. So it's not very hard for me to kind of access those feelings. But I guess, yeah, just putting yourself in someone's shoes, and I do have a lot of people saying how bad like the characters' choices are all the time. And sometimes that's in, you know, like a negative Instagram post that someone decides to tag me in. And they're just like, he's such a bad person. He makes all these terrible decisions. And I'm like, yeah, well, he's 17. So if we cast our mind back to what we were all like at that age, I don't think we were making incredibly self-aware, informed decisions about anything, you know?
Definitely not. No. And also, why do people tag you in the same thing happens to me sometimes. I'm like, why? Please don't tag. Please don't tag me if it's not nice. But no, that was not a cop-out. It was a great answer, and I'm gonna steal it when I get that question asked, because it happened to me before, and it's hard to answer, because like you said, it's like it's not, you don't approach it in a way that's like, how can I write for teens? It's so specific to the story and the characters and the different factors at play. So thanks for providing an answer for me the next time I get asked. One thing about this book that was great as well was I love that you didn't shy away from Noah being like a sexual 17-year-old, and the fact that that was a part of the story. I think with a lot of YA, there can be some tiptoeing around it, or it obviously depends on the book and the story they're trying to tell. But I always appreciate when it feels like a story is more sex positive, and those are my words, not yours. I don't know if you'd characterize it that way, but it certainly felt that way. Did you feel like, I guess, to like back up and think of it at the 10,000-foot view level, with like these book bans and a lot of the rhetoric from certain politicians focused on these books, and it's obviously like just the foundation of it is, of course, homophobia and transphobia. Was this something that you wanted to intentionally work in? Like, were you motivated to do that? Because was that at all like a factor? Was it not a factor at all? Just how did it play into the story?
Yeah, I mean, I think for like in the first instance, that kind of journey that Noah goes on with his sexuality and with intimacy and stuff like that, that kind of just felt really integral to his journey in the book. And as, you know, an authentic teen living his life, that kind of just felt very real for that age. And then I think on top of that, then once you know that it's going to be happening, I think, you know, you consciously try and do it in a way that is going to be really positive for someone who's reading the book. You know, it's, I think one thing I like to do in my books, if I have anything romance or sex related in a YA book, is to show that it's not like the movies. Like it doesn't, it's never like that, because I think, you know, when I was a teen, I feel like we all had these very lofty expectations of what our kind of romantic relationships would be as teens and young adults, you know, because of all the beautiful rom-com movies and all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, it's not at all like that. And I think the queer teens in particular, you know, they have basically no education about any of this because it's not included in any school curriculum. A lot of parents don't feel comfortable talking about it, especially if their parents are not queer. It can be a really difficult thing to navigate. So, you know, once I knew that Noah would be going through these things, I just wanted it to be, you know, stuff on the page that would just really make, you know, queer kids feel seen and know that, you know, it's totally normal to be freaking out about everything, and that, you know, nothing will probably go to plan, and just all of that sort of stuff. You know, I just really leaned into the awkwardness of the whole experience, which, I mean, I think for most people is what it is like, and that's fine, you know.
Sure.
So
yeah, when you're 17 and when you're 34, things can go.
Precisely, that's the thing. Like, you know, it's really interesting territory to navigate, especially, you know, when it's all those kind of firsts as a teenager. And I think, you know, the more that we can sort of talk about them in a really honest way, and especially these days, you know, putting consent on the page and stuff like that, I think it's really important, you know, for queer teens to see examples of how those intimate relationships kind of work in a really safe space. You know, I love the fact that if you're reading a book, you can just shut it whenever you like. If something's too much, you just close it and move on. You know, I think it's a really safe kind of media for teens to read about those kind of experiences.
That's a really good point. Yeah, you can very easily turn it off. Quick reminder to anyone we have a few questions in there, but add your question if you want to ask a question. I have just a couple more. So I loved all the different forms that love kind of took in the book. There was obviously romantic love, but then the sibling love with Noah's sister. I loved that dynamic. He, of course, has a challenging relationship with his mom in some ways. It can be messy and complicated. And then there's the relationship with himself even. And, you know, he struggles with body dysmorphia, feeling too skinny. And I really appreciated the way that you kind of explored those different avenues. Was that something that you, I guess, was there one form of love, or even forget the love aspect, if there was any like message or theme that you really wanted to underscore with the book, what would that be with this book?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, the book is kind of just about the lengths people will go to feel seen and loved and worthy, I guess. And then, you know, that plays into all of those different aspects of Noah's life, you know, whether it's seeking this romantic attachment, or, you know, feeling like his mum understands him, or feeling comfortable in his own body. Like that kind of plays into that a lot. And then it also does, I guess, for a few of the other characters as well, who are kind of on their own version of that journey. But yeah, I think that's what it was always kind of about for me. It's just, you know, that's all we want. And sometimes people go to pretty extreme lengths, and not always, you know, positive lengths to achieve that. You know, people get into some pretty dangerous territory in many different ways, just trying to be seen and be loved. So I think that's kind of what it's about. I don't know how much that comes through in the story, but I hope it does a bit.
Oh, for sure. No, it totally does. I think that's such a great answer. And I feel like so many things that we all do, you can kind of trace it back to like the original source of just wanting that connection, wanting to access love and feel seen. I think that, that sums it up very nicely. I love that. So beyond writing a fantasy book, what's up next for you? JK, he's not writing a fantasy book, people. But what's up next?
Well, as I mentioned briefly before, I'm working through some edits for my third book, which I'm very excited about. It's kind of like the final installment in my like imaginary trilogy that I've written, because my books are not actually connected in any way, but they are all kind of from the same world. You know, they all take place in this town where I grew up in Australia. But the third book kind of follows on from Noah's journey. And so the protagonist has just finished high school. And so that's something I've always wanted to write about, that age group of when you've finished school and you're just like, what is next? I feel like it's a really fascinating time in a person's life. So yeah, it's a slightly more mature protagonist. There's a very big travel element of the book. I wanted to get out of that kind of country town and show the character a bit of the world. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I just have a few like problems to solve in my structural edits, which is always fun and kind of a necessary part of any writing journey. But yeah, that's really fun. And then after that, I'm actually not sure. I usually have such a clear idea of what's next, but I feel like the whole kind of like moving across the world thing has taken up a lot of brain space for the last few months. So I haven't had time to sit down and really kind of nut that out. So I'm excited to really get settled here in New York and then do all of that. You can probably see my apartment. We've got like furniture, but there's not a single thing on any of the walls or anything decorative at all. So it feels kind of a bit strange in here at the moment. So we've got, some kind of life stuff to do, and then I'll get back to whatever book 4 ends up kind of being.
I love that. I love that. Would you say that's not crown molding? What do you call like the texture on the wall?
No, I think it's like wainscoting.
Oh, okay. I'm not an interior designer, so I'm the worst person to know this vocabulary, but I like it.
Really nice though. It makes it look at least like there's something going on in here.
Yeah. It looks like it's the art on the wall, but like in a chic, cool way or something. I don't know. It looks great. I think I'm asking you all the questions that I hate to ask people, because I don't, not that you hated this question, but I feel the need to always have some like very exciting update of like, here's what's coming out 6 months from now. And I think that's great to just be like, you know what, I'm not sure after this next book, and I'm going to breathe and find some wall art, some art for the wall. We have some questions.
While we're on next projects, why don't you tell everyone about your next book, which comes out so soon?
Yeah, it comes out in April. I'm so excited. If I See You Again Tomorrow is my next book. It is a gay YA time loop story, romance. So when you meet the protagonist in the beginning, Clark, he's already stuck in a time loop. He's been reliving the same day. He's on day 309 when you meet him. Like he's repeated 309. I know, right? So, but then he meets a boy that kind of appears out of nowhere in the time loop, which is very strange in the time loop because everything's exactly the same every day. So he kind of has to figure out who this boy is and if this boy can help him get out of the time loop. So yeah, I'm really excited for it.
I love the time loop story so much. I'm like all in already.
Yeah, thank you. It's cool because I think it's a trope that everyone knows, and it can feel kind of tired and like been there, done that. But then when you look at each time loop story, there's so many different ways to kind of slice and dice it and have fun with it, and it can still feel fresh. I hope people want to read a time loop story.
And it has a beautiful cover.
Oh, thank you. I know. I love the cover. I really like it. Sweet. Okay, cool. I will go over to these questions. Let's see here. Okay, I've not read these yet, so let me make sure. Okay. Are there any new games you've been playing lately, or have you replayed any classic titles recently?
I don't think I've played any new games, except for some of the newer Pokemon games, if they count, not kind of in Noah's eyes, probably. But I do, my favorite game as a teenager was a game called Diablo 2 and Diablo 1, but mainly Diablo 2. And Diablo 3 came out a few years ago, and I did play that because I'm a sucker for that. But nobody probably knows what that is. It's very big, I swear, in like the online role-playing game world. And it's a brilliant game, and it's one of the games that I based the game in the book upon.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, someone wrote Pokemon Violet. Is that a whole different game, or does that have to do with the game you were just mentioning? I don't know. I'm
You're definitely not a gamer, are you?
Okay, I'm not a gamer, sorry. So the second question here, and I just lost it. Okay, here we go. What differences, this is from Jacob. Hey, Jacob. What differences have you noticed while writing each book, whether in relation to your own personal journey or just in the planning and structure?
I will say that my planning for this book was more comprehensive than the first book. I think I got a handle on kind of that process, and particularly the outlining. So my first book, when I signed with my literary agent, I did a pretty big revision for her. And most of that was all about making sure all of the different plot lines and character arcs kind of followed the same path, so that when something kind of fell apart, like the climax for each of the plots, it all happened basically at the same time. So then you have that kind of, crazy moment, that kind of dark night of the soul thing, if you're talking in like 3-act structure, where literally everything goes wrong and there's only like 30 pages left in the book and it seems absolutely impossible that everything will work out. So I did a lot of work on that for my first book after it was written. So then writing the second one, I think I was a lot more clearly able to sort of, plan for those kind of eventualities. In terms of personal journey, and I'm sure Robbie would probably agree, second books are, I think you put a lot of pressure on yourself. I think we perceive this really weird pressure about like second books, and everyone talks about how hard they are, and they kind of are, but I think maybe we make them hard by thinking they're hard and telling ourselves all these things about it needs to be as good as the first one, and it has to be different, but it has to be not too different, because like the same people need to like it, but you also need to like have new readers. And I don't know, I think you play a lot of mind games with yourself for a second book. So I think it's about kind of turning that off. Would you agree?
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think you tapped into my brain and read my exact thoughts there. Totally. I feel like with your debut, you're nervous about everything for a different reason, because it's all like a new experience and you don't know what to expect. And then you kind of feel like now there's expectations with book 2, and you have, it's a mind game for sure. I feel like now with book 3 coming out soon, I'm finally in a place where I feel, not that I like am a pro or know everything, but it's like I do have that excitement, but I feel like I can kind of navigate my emotions and my expectations a little bit better. Yeah. So yeah, book 2 can be messy, but to your point, a lot of it does come from internal sources.
Just like everything.
Exactly. Okay, here is one. Okay. Question for both. If you were asked to give someone a book that represented you the most, aside from your own works, what would you give? It's an interesting question. A good question.
I've never heard that question before.
I know.
Difficult.
I like that. Let me think. Represented me the most. That it's a very good question, and it's also tricky because I feel like there's always aspects of different characters that are relatable, but not necessarily the full story or the full experience of that character. So it's tough. I feel a little stumped. I want like 10 minutes to think about it. But go ahead.
I think of like any books right now. I'm like trying to look at the books on my shelf, being like, what books have I ever read? I don't even know.
I know.
God, I'm trying to even think of like a character that I really, really related to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love a lot of like Becky Albertalli's work and Adam Silvera's Julian Winter's books resonate with me in different ways too. I think too, like the style of the writing, like it's beyond just the character themselves. I think like the way the story is told is something that can either resonate with me like personally or not. So it's hard. I don't know. I'm stumped. I'm sorry, y'all.
I know it's tough. I think you mentioned Becky, and I think Becky's writing feels very close to how I talk and how my friends talk and stuff. I think that would be one that I really connect with, like on an instant level, where it feels like just really comfortable and just really easy, and just, I don't know, they flow so easily for me, I think. And I think, you know, Becky writes a lot about kind of like theater stuff as well, and I feel like that fits really well with my kind of teenage experience. So maybe I'll go with the entire Becky Albertalli kind of canon.
Yeah, that's a good one. I saw a few people noting the Love, Simon similarities in a good way. It's definitely its own distinct story for sure, but it has that vibe to it. So I can easily see that. Sweet. I think that wraps it up. Nick, do you want to come back? Do you have any final parting words?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Tobias, and thank you so much, Robbie, for making this happen. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having us. And thank you, Robbie, for being such a brilliant host.
Of course. Tobias, congratulations on your sophomore release. We're so happy to see it. Take a bow, Noah Mitchell.
Thank you for having the book.
And don't forget, everyone, if you haven't yet purchased it, you can do it online. We also have it obviously in the store. For right now, you can get signed and personalized book plates. We'll be roughly offering that for like a week, and then no more. Then you'll get a signed book plate if you're lucky. Just make sure in the comments to put what personalizations you would like, and we'll also get you one of those really cool art cards. Lastly, before we go, where can both of you be found on the social medias?
Take it away, Tobias.
My handle is Tobias_Madden. I'm mainly really only present on Instagram these days. I did delete my Twitter not that long ago. And I do have TikTok, but I'm just like slightly too old for TikTok. So I've kind of retired from that, and I just go on and like post a video if I have something to post, and TikTok does not like that, and it doesn't show anyone the videos. So probably just come and find me on Instagram, to be honest. I'm much more fun on there than anywhere else.
Love it. I'm kind of the same. I'm also on Twitter. I've tweeted less recently just because of everything happening at Twitter, but I'm also on Twitter at Robbie Couch, and definitely Instagram. I'm on Instagram probably the most as well, and TikTok. Although I agree, it can be tricky over on TikTok. So, but yeah, I'm at Robbie Couch on all of them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We hope to have you at our next virtual event, and have a good night. Bye.
Bye.